Hello and welcome to Alpha Guard, a sci-fi thriller most easily described as Jack Reacher in space. If this is your first time visiting, here's a quick rundown of what's what. My name is Samuel George London and I'm a writer from Hampshire in the UK. Usually I write comic books, but this is my very first novel. I'll be publishing Alpha Guard on a monthly basis, chapter by chapter, right here for free, so please be sure to subscribe to stay notified when new chapters become available. Obviously, with this being a podcast, this is the audiobook version, but if you'd like to read it instead, then head on over to alphagard.substack.com. Now, don't worry, we're almost finished with this preamble, but the chapter reading you're about to hear is an AI voiceover. However, when it comes time to eventually publish Alpha Guard as a fully polished novel, I will be hiring a human to read the audiobook instead. Lastly, if you'd like to follow me on social media, you can do so on Instagram, TikTok and X using the same handle, Samuel G. London. That being said, whether you're on social media or not, please consider sharing Alpha Guard with anyone you think would be interested. Happy listening, and please let me know what you think by leaving a review. Ciao for now.
Alpha Guard, Chapter 3. "How's it looking?" Eric asked in my earpiece. Through the cameras on my mech suit, he saw everything I could. So really, he almost had as much sensory input as I did. Ultimately, though, Eric only trusted boots on the ground. He'd always tell me, "If no one's there, it ain't real." To be honest, I could take it or leave it, but I did respect his old-school nature. Answering his question, I reported, "All clear, now entering the diamond." I couldn't believe I was here again so soon. But that's the life of a bug. Eat, protect, sleep, repeat. I marched up to the front desk with the usual passers-by gawking at my hulking frame. The single human receptionist was talking to someone on her headset. So one of the multiple android receptionists started speaking to me. "Welcome to Andres Corp. How can I help?" And staring at the blue light in the middle of its face, I replied, "I'm here to pick up Amrita Andres." As the words left the speakers of my mech suit, a herd of reporters stampeded toward me from the other side of the lobby. My HUD went into overdrive identifying them all, but they all checked out as bona fide journalists. A few moments later, the human receptionist ended her call and said, "Apologies, Alpha Guard. Please follow me." Taking her time behind the front desk, she strolled toward the building's entrance gates. Following her on the public side of the desk, I had to barge through the reporters while they shouted questions at me. "Alpha Guard, do you support Andres Corp's outreach program? What do you think is causing the recent surge in teenage deaths? How would you improve the pods?" Eric chimed in. "Don't say a word." And then, ensuring that none of the reporters discovered what was really going through my mind, I replied by text, "No shit, Sherlock. These people are vultures." At the gates were two bulky security guards wearing tight-fitting black suits with black shirts, black ties, and black shoes. I guess it was an attempt at showing they meant business, but I didn't hold it against them. They were probably ordered by some line manager to wear all black. While the security guards held back the reporters, the receptionist opened up the disabled access gate for me to walk through. Round the corner and out of sight, she pressed the up button for the elevators. 30 seconds later, the doors opened and she gestured me inside. I stepped in and turned around. Waiting for some more guidance, I audibly coughed. The receptionist came to her senses and said, "Floor 13. Ms. Andras is on floor 13. "My lucky number," I replied. She smiled and wandered off, probably returning to the front desk. The fingers on my mech suit were too big for the buttons, so I had to use the sharp-ended handle from my taser stick. The doors closed, and seconds later, opened on floor 13 with a short woman welcoming me. Just over 5 feet, she was definitely an earthling. In a posh English accent, she said, "Nice to meet you, Alpha Guard. My name is Camilla. I'm Ms. Andres's personal assistant. She's waiting for you in conference room A." "Do your dinger. When's this job gonna get going?" Eric exclaimed in my ear. It was rare for him to lose patience like that, and even rarer for him to use a Scottish phrase I had zero understanding of. So I couldn't help but react with a laughing emoji. A couple of corridors later, we arrived at the conference room. Camilla opened the double doors like a magician's assistant on stage, and Amrita Andrus was revealed. I'd seen her countless times on TV, but nothing prepared me for seeing her in the flesh. Nearing 6 feet, she had dark brown skin, high cheekbones, long thick hair, broad shoulders, slim build, and piercing green eyes. Although she must have been approaching her 60s, I could see why she'd caught the attention of Tristan Andras way back when. Confidently stepping forward with an open hand, and in her softened Indian accent she said, "Hello, AlphaGuard. It's a pleasure to meet you." Somehow, even through my mech suit gloves, I could feel her warmth when we shook hands. "It's an honor, Ms. Andrus," I said, "but we've got a busy day ahead. So if you don't mind, I'd like to make sure we're all on the same page before we head out to New Jazero." "Yes, of course. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail," she said. "Very astute, ma'am." "Please call me Amrita." "Yes, ma'am. I mean, Amrita." I don't know why I fumbled over my words. I was never nervous, and for whatever reason, I wanted to impress her. Over the next 30 minutes, I clarified the day's itinerary by going over maps, blueprints, and contingency plans. After I finished, she declared, "I can see why you're called the best bug on the Red Planet." "Thank you, but most of that is down to Mr. Green. I'm just the bat who hits the ball." "I'm sure that's not true. It must take a tremendous amount of skill to do what you do. So thank you for agreeing to be my bodyguard over the next few days." "Why don't you two get a room?" Eric interjected. I managed to ignore him because, if anything, the interaction felt more like a mother speaking to her son. I was 8 when my mom died. I remember it being a wet November evening. We were having dinner, and then the doorbell rang. 2 soaked police officers walked in. My dad told me to keep my little sister busy, but I was able to make out the odd word or two. After a while, I couldn't stand it. I went over and asked what was going on. I still remember them looking down at me. The officers had sadness in their eyes, but my dad had fear all over his face. She'd been run over by a guy in a manual car who didn't see her crossing the street in some heavy rain. If it were an auto car, the sensors would have stopped the car and she'd still be alive. I was thankful that on Mars, all vehicles had to be electric and auto-driving by law. The only exceptions were the vehicles in the resource mines. My mom was the moneymaker, so when she was still with us, we lived in a big, beautiful suburban house. But after her death, Dad seriously struggled to make ends meet. Over time, the houses and areas we lived in got worse and worse. And after 10 years of trying to pick up the pieces, on my 18th birthday, I got a funded ticket to Mars. I hated leaving my 13-year-old sister behind, but I felt as though I had to become my own man and make a new life for myself. "Amrita, Camila, please take a seat," I requested while motioning toward the rear seats of an open car. We were in the basement garage of the Diamond, getting ready to go to New Jezero. We had 3 cars in our convoy, Amrita, Camilla, and me in one, with the other 2 empty but being controlled by Eric. The plan was to have them switch formation throughout the journey, similar to the idea behind the 3-cup scam you see on the streets of most big cities. Deception was the name of the game. I told Amrita and Camilla this was to confuse the media vultures, but in reality, it was to discourage any opportunistic kidnappers from trying their luck. Sitting myself in one of the front seats facing them, I asked, "You both ready?" Amrita looked at Camilla briefly and then gave me the go-ahead with a nod. On my HUD, I confirmed our route, and all 3 cars set off together toward the exit ramp. Driving out of the garage and onto the streets of Dome 1, it only took 30 seconds before a pack of robo-bikes caught up with us. Robo-bikes were used for all sorts of applications. But for this situation, the remote-controlled motorbikes each had a high-resolution swivel camera on a robotic arm to capture photos at any angle, at speed. Our cars had smart windows, so they couldn't see shit inside. and if I really wanted to, I could have turned off the exterior display within the car. But Amrita and Camilla didn't seem to mind. Plus, it was entertaining to watch the robo-bikes attempt to get a usable photo. For my sins, I even looked at the social media feeds to see what they were posting. As usual, it was a bunch of misleading headlines with photos that totally misrepresented what was actually happening. I didn't have a problem with the robo-bikes following us while we were in Dome 1, especially as there wasn't much chance of losing them because of the blanket 20 miles per hour speed limit across the city. This was enforced on all vehicles through the Martian government's artificial intelligence, Plato, Programmable Law Automation and Technology Operator. That's what Plato stood for, an all-encompassing AI to help the Martian government implement laws and operate all infrastructure technology. Sure, they seriously shoehorned the acronym, but naming it after the ancient Greek philosopher came naturally, or logical even. This was because Martian society was highly influenced by the ideas of Plato, with Plato itself being the so-called philosopher king. I say this through gritted teeth because over 50 years ago, Andrus Corp were the ones who originally programmed Plato. However, this was before Tristan Andrus bought the diamond. Plus, for the past 5 decades it had been functioning perfectly well with no lapses into psychotic behavior, so there was no reason not to trust it wouldn't continue that way. At first it felt seriously weird to be governed by AI, but after a while I got used to it. Having said that, I could never imagine it working on Earth, but that's the beauty of starting a society from scratch. Although Plato was essentially in control of our daily lives, it was always accountable to the elected human guardians. At any time, the guardians could pull the plug on Plato and revert to manual systems of operation and governance, and that's who we were going to visit in New Jezero first. The Council of Guardians for Mars, or CGM for short. Just like you'd see in Arizona, Highway 1 was still a simple, undivided highway. Open to the Martian air, you had one lane going to the pods and one lane going to Dome 1. On the other hand, instead of battling against the elements, Highway 2 was made up of 2 above-ground tunnels. Each transparent tunnel had 3 lanes, one going southeast toward New Jezero, which was our direction of travel, and the other going northwest, back toward Dome 1. Looking at the 2 different roads, it was clear where all the money was being spent. Ensuring all the robo-bikes ended up behind us, we went around the interchange's traffic circle several times before I approved the car to exit onto the ramp for Highway 2. To start with, all 3 of our cars were driving on the inside lane at the speed limit of 30 miles per hour. This was also enforced by Plato, but because everyone had got used to the speed limit in Dome 1, they usually traveled at 20 miles per hour. On the inside lane, we were overtaking everyone, but the 7 robo-bikes that had stuck with us from Dome 1 were right on our tail. The speed limit meant there was no chance of them overtaking us, unless we were slowed down by someone in front. So when the timing was right, Eric maneuvered our 3 cars to span across all 3 lanes to prevent that scenario from happening. This blocked the entire highway with no chance of the robo-bikes getting past us before New Jezero. That's when Eric spoke up. "Look lively, Yankee. Check out the semi-truck in the middle lane, about 500 meters ahead." On my HUD, Eric displayed the specific video feed, where I could see the rear door of the semi lowering down onto the highway to form a ramp. Rolling down the ramp backwards were 4 motorbikes with 2 riders per bike, one driving and one wielding some sort of 2-handed gun. I hadn't seen people on motorbikes since I was a teenager, watching motocross in the backcountry of Vermont. What was even more disturbing were the fumes coming out of the tailpipes. The very fact that they had tailpipes at all was bad news. This meant they were gas-powered and that Plato had 0 control over them. "Don't move a muscle," Eric stated. "I'm launching a micro-drone and switching to calm mode." In order to keep Amrita and Camilla in the dark about what was actually going on outside, Eric seamlessly switched the smart windows to automatically generate a calm version of events outside. All I had to do was remain motionless, and they'd be none the wiser. In case I had to jump into action, Eric still had the micro-drone video feed of outside running on my HUD. With a serious threat ahead, Eric placed the cars in single file on the inside lane with our car at the rear. He then sped them up to the maximum 30 miles an hour. "Any update on what those guns are?" I texted Eric. "They look like homemade grenade launchers. In fact, all of their gear looks homemade." I reacted with a thumbs-up emoji and messaged back, "And their MO?" If I had to guess, I'd say dissidents from the pods. But whoever they are, it doesn't matter now. They need to be stopped. The motorbikes were also in single file, but in the middle lane and just 10 meters away. Suddenly, 2 of the 4 motorbikes braked, skidding until they were right behind us. The robo-bikes weren't far behind that, and the people controlling them must have been having a field day, because seconds later, Camilla screamed. Almost jumping out of her skin, Amrita asked, "What is it, Camilla? What's going on?" Holding up her tablet, Camilla showed Amrita the screen, who then looked at me with almost as stern a stare as I'd received from the thin man the day before. "Show me what's going on outside." Knowing the game was up, Eric switched the smart windows back to the real exterior display. Just as he did, all 4 gun-wielding passengers of the motorbikes shot their grenade launchers in short succession of each other. The first grenade came from the front and unintentionally went straight into the ceiling of the tunnel. Exploding above them, it knocked the rider and passenger off the bike. All 3 cars in our convoy narrowly missed them by swerving right across the highway to the outside lane. The robo-bikes also managed to dodge them, but they weren't so lucky with a bus in the middle lane. The second grenade came from the back and would have been on target if we hadn't been forced to move to the outside lane. Coordination was clearly not their strong point. The third grenade came from the remaining motorbike at the front, but soared right over us and landed in the middle of the robo-bikes, dismantling them all. Knowing they'd be missing out on the biggest payday of their careers, I would have loved to have seen the sour faces of the media vultures controlling them. From the back again, the 4th grenade was a direct hit. Landing on the hood of the middle car, it flipped up into the air and we drove underneath. It came back to bite them, though. The same idiots who shot the grenade were then wiped out by the car they'd just exploded. It was a shame the robo-bikes weren't there to capture that moment. With 1 motorbike left behind us and 1 in front, the one behind zipped past at 50 miles per hour. However, they clearly hadn't practiced at that speed because they rocketed into the back of the other motorbike. The collision sent them all into the sidewall of the tunnel, spreading the riders and passengers across all 3 lanes. Leaving the decimation of vehicles behind us, Amrita directed her anger at me with a finger in my face. "Don't ever deceive me again. If there's a threat on my life, I want to know about it." "Yes, ma'am. It won't happen again." I felt I'd lost the privilege of calling her Amrita, and she didn't correct me. The next 10 minutes was cold, hard silence. Even Eric didn't say anything. Usually I was comfortable with that, but seeing the interchange for New Jezero coming up, I had to break the ice. "Camilla, have you ever been to NJ?" "No, but when I was at university we did a virtual walkthrough."
"What did you study?"
"Architecture." "So how did you become a PA?" Amrita interrupted. "She's the architect of my life. I recruited her at a Cambridge alumni dinner." Sensing she was warming up again and having spent my childhood floating around New England, I asked, "Is that Cambridge, Massachusetts, or Cambridge, regular old England?" Camilla took back the conversation. "We prefer to call it merry old England if you don't mind. But yes, we met at the original Cambridge." "Duly noted," I said. "You both went to university there?" Amrita answered this time. "We did. And coincidentally, that's where I met Tristan as well. Incredible how so much of my life has come out of chance meetings in the great halls of Cambridge." Before I got a chance to keep the focus on them, Camilla came in with a question directed at me. "And how about you? Which university did you go to?" Trying to be funny and vague, I replied, "I majored in ass-whooping at the University of Hard Knocks, if that counts." Swooping in to redirect the conversation, Amrita said, "It certainly does, Alphagard. Now, how much further is it to our parking space? Or spot, as you like to say in American English. It's just around the next corner, Amrita.